President Trump taking on the elites of the world, pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, criticizing Germany for being unfair when it comes to trade, and telling NATO leaders to pay their fair share as they stood by snickering, smirking, and America needs right now. A president who looks out for American workers and American taxpayers. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Bowling. Welcome to Cashin. Our Cashin crew this week: Mercedes Slapp, Lisa Booth, Rachel Campos-Duffy, and Jessica Tarlov. Welcome, everybody. So we're going to start with you, Rachel. He's calling everyone out. What do you think about this? Is this good for America on the global stage?
Well, I have to tell you, Eric, when I heard the president say, I represent the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris, I felt like the 4th of July. It was an amazing moment. He's keeping his promise, putting America first. Look, our elites are embarrassed of our president when they see him on the global stage with Macron and Merkel. They cringe when he basically crashes their fancy cocktail party environment and tells them that they need to foot the bill. But in middle America, people are smiling. They're doing a slow clap because they know a deal like the Paris Accord, for example, that disadvantages our workers and causes America to foot the bill for this pet project of the elites doesn't affect the elites. Their white-collar jobs aren't affected. It's the farmers. It's the guys in the coal mines and the people working in the factories in middle America that put President Trump in the White House. So it's really quite an amazing moment to see him really keep his promise and put America and its workers first.
And Mercedes, I got to think, this is exactly what Donald Trump candidate ran on. He said he was going to be the anti-globalist. He wasn't involved. He wanted to pull out of NATO. He wanted to pull out of TPP. And this Paris Climate Accord is something that is a globalist agenda idea.
Right. I think, you know, you would argue that the nationalist, the populist branch of the White House, they were very excited yesterday, and he was loving every minute of, or on Thursday, loving every minute of that speech in the Rose Garden. I tell you, Eric, I think what the president is doing is that you've got to go back to this Paris Climate Agreement, where, in essence, it was a flawed framework that was set up. It was President Obama who basically didn't go through the ratification process like the other 128 nations that did go through a ratification process in their legislature. The U.S. would have to play by a different set of rules. You would have China, who could increase emissions till 2030, India, who in a contingency would want $2.5 billion in order to play. I mean, really, the framework of the agreement itself was very flawed. And so I think for President Trump, it was his moment to say, this is for the American worker. This is about the American economy, and basically going in and breaking the China. And I think that it was about time that this happens, because we want to work with our foreign leaders. Obviously, it's America's not only first, but America's not going to go at it alone. But at the same time, it's got to be to the advantage of what is for our economy and for the working class.
Yeah, exactly. And Lisa, hang in there. I want to bring Jessica in here. You know, on the climate accord, I find it very, very hypocritical when all these world leaders show up in their private planes, Jessica. But let's move on to the other thing. Let's move on to, show me that video again when President Trump was talking at the podium and the world leaders are right there. Look, we were spot shadowing, smirking, snickering world leaders. You know, he's asking them, there's Macron on the left, he's asking them to just do what you promised to do. In the treaty, you promised to spend 2% of your GDP on your own defense. What's so bad about that?
Well, I'm just wondering if that's before or after he pushed one of the NATO leaders out of the way, because that video also exists and was hilarious.
But I would say, listen, it was Montenegro. They were just let in.
No big deal.
And they happen to be the
Germany.
smallest country of all.
All right, remember that, Montenegro. You can get pushed because you're tiny. Anyway, no, what I would say, though, and I've heard this from a lot of people, that the premise of asking people to pay their fair share, the 2% that they pledged, is not ridiculous. What is ridiculous is to take over these moments to make it aggressive, to essentially yell at these other foreign leaders, to create an environment in which Angela Merkel has to stand up there and say we can no longer rely on the U.S. as she's standing next to Prime Minister Modi.
She pulled those remarks back.
And can I just say also on the Paris climate deal, when you say this is good for the American worker, I wonder what you guys think about the predictions that we will lose $8.2 trillion over the course of the century by pulling out. I don't even want to talk about the climate, the
degree. Can we not go too deep into this?
Why?
Because the Heritage Foundation and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce had it the other way, that we're going to lose $3 trillion had we stayed in lost GDP. Let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. Let me bring Lisa.
God forbid we use the numbers.
Well, no, I'm giving you the numbers. I'm using the Heritage
Eric,
Foundation and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Can I get in here?
Trillions.
Eric,
I got to bring Lisa. Lisa, I want to bring you in here and let's talk a little bit about this globalist, this anti-globalist, nationalist agenda, America First agenda that Donald Trump promised he was elected on, he won on, and it is now implementing.
Well, and let's be clear about something, Eric. President Obama wanted NATO members to spend more, but he was unsuccessful in doing so. There's been reports that our NATO members are submitting reports showing how they are, trying to move forward and move toward increasing spending on defense. We also have Germany, Merkel committing to spending more on defense. So there has been successes under President Trump that we did not see under President Obama. In regard to the climate agreement, I dare the Democratic Party to try to take that messaging to the American people in 2018 and 2020 and convince them that somehow this was a good deal. By all reports that we have seen, it's going to cost the American people trillions of dollars, millions of jobs. We're going to decrease. We're committed to decreasing our emissions by 26 to 28%. Hold on, I'm not finished yet, Jessica. By 26, 28% by 2025, when China can increase their emissions by 2030. MIT researchers telling us that even if all countries are doing their part, the decrease is going to be the impact's going to be negligible. So I dare the Democratic Party to take that message. President Trump is right on the money when he says, I represent Pittsburgh, not Paris. So I dare, Jessica, I dare the Democratic Party to take that messaging to the American people.
I guess that there's a dare here.
So we have two sides. Jessica has a Stanford study. We have every other study on the planet on our side. However, okay, so we have a split. But let's do this, Jessica. Let's reality. Let's bring us back to reality. At least 2 days this week, the stock market made record brand new highs, knowing full well that Donald Trump was pulling out of the Paris Accord. Clearly, I mean, they're smart people on Wall Street, right? And they're betting with their pocketbooks. So they believe that the pulling out of the accord was a good deal.
Well, I don't think that's what it means. I mean, Donald Trump has seen, obviously, successes in the market. We know that President Obama did contribute to these gains. But listen, we'll give him credit for that. I'm all for it. But what I would say is when you have the heads of these major corporations like Goldman Sachs, where Gary Cohn, his top economic advisor, came out of tweeting for the very first time about this because it's such a bad deal. When you have Exxon doesn't even want it.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm saying. Hold on, let's bring Mercy. But Mercy, here's the thing. Look, the Wall Street says new record highs. They're putting money for the future of the economic growth, not what President Obama did 8 years ago. It's for the future. And if Jessica's studies were right and there was going to be $8 trillion of lost GDP, there's no one in their right mind on Wall Street that would put money into that.
Well, and I find it fascinating because even these startups, there was this piece on these startups that they were going to struggle because of the Paris Climate Agreement. Then you had this individual come out and basically say, he's running one of these companies. He's like, oh, no, our investments are going to be fine. Yes, it's disheartening that we're not part of the Paris Climate Agreement. But clean energy, those investments are going to continue because the United States is a leader in terms of innovation of clean energy as well as oil and energy production. So I think to even say that that's going to impact the investment in these companies, I think is ridiculous. And I also think that when you're talking about that taxpayers have to foot the bill, $2.5 billion that would have to go to a green climate fund that was not even authorized by the Congress. I mean, I find that to be incredibly troubling. And I think that's why I think there's a certain piece to this. I think there's a sense that it's okay that we don't need to be part of this international agreement, which creates international oversight of what we can and cannot do.
Coming up, Hillary Clinton blaming fake news for helping her lose the election. The media bashes President Trump for talking about fake news, but why aren't they bashing her? Double standard?
I had memory foams, I had feather pillows, and I'd always wake up with neck pain. After sleeping on my pillow, I didn't wake up with the headaches, I was more aligned.
I didn't realize the connection between the pillow and sleep. When I switched to my pillow, I got a better night's sleep, and I love it.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of My Pillow.